Thank you very much, Gary. Look, I'm very pleased to speak on this very progressive bill, and I want to acknowledge the lead role played by our colleague, Deputy Duncan Smith, in terms of the genesis of this bill and the work that Deputy Patrick has done on it to date as well. Now, climate change, as we know, is the single most important challenge of our time. It is absolutely existential. It is beyond urgent, though one would really wonder if that reality has dawned on many of those who attended COP26 in Glasgow. The scale of the task facing us can often feel completely overwhelming, and it would be understandable that we as individual citizens might say, this is too big for me, nothing I can do can change anything. But this is simply untrue, and we cannot be fatalistic. We cannot fall into this trap. Yes, we do all despair at the foot-dragging and the incrementalism of the big polluters and the leaders of large nations who will keep permitting them to do what they do, and to hell with the consequences. But still, we do all have a role to play. We all have a responsibility. We can take some control of our own lives, of our planet's destiny. We all have agency and we all have power. And that's fundamentally what this bill is about. You know, when we are shopping, most of us these days try, insofar as we can, to be health conscious. We try to make decisions about what we put into our bodies based on the standardised nutritional values on the packaging that we see in our supermarkets. And I also make decisions, many of us do, on what I buy based on labour standards applied by companies who produce the products that we're interested in buying. You know, do they treat their workers well? Where do they source their ingredients? Where do the ingredients sourced sustainably? That's often a very difficult decision to make and a question to answer, as there are simply no commonly understood legal standards to define that term. Too much of it involves guesswork, and it's a case of finding out what you can for yourself. Now, I know that the question of labelling is a powerful and often emotive one. There is much about their products, companies' products, that themselves and indeed entire states do not want you to know. Just look at the resistance to a modest proposal emanating from these houses that the Labour Party supports to label goods produced in the illegally occupied territories of Palestine. You know, labelling matters, and so does the presentation of labelling, or rather the misrepresentation of labelling. Now, the phenomenon of greenwashing mentioned by my colleague Deputy Patrick is something we are seeing more and more of, and we see some of the most egregious carbon and methane emitting firms and industries in the world mislead and deliberately misrepresent their environmental credentials because they can. And they can get away with it. More often than not, they get away with it with impunity because their cant goes unchallenged, and there are no robust legal standards that apply to this area. Greenwashing reminds me of the behaviour of some of the biggest firms who think that by wrapping themselves in the rainbow flag, they are good employers, and they are embracing equality and diversity and basic human respect and decency. Some of these companies are among those who are most openly aggressive and hostile, for example, towards trade unions. You don't get to call yourself decent if that's your policy. You can't define what decency involves. Now, in the very same way, a firm responsible for polluting our air, land and water should not be able to make up their own tailored, customised, bespoke rules on sustainability. That simply cannot be allowed to happen. And that's what this bill is about. Now, the bill at the same time does not overpromise. It is a modest proposal designed to make industry and producers honest and to treat consumers as informed citizens, providing all of us with the knowledge we need to do the right thing. Now, I am pleased that government will not be opposing this bill. That is very progressive. We are prepared to work with government on improving this bill if that is required, and we are aware that there is work going on at EU level in terms of the standardisation and harmonisation of this process. Now, I doubt that we will be made aware this week, or indeed earlier, of the government's plans or the EU plans formally in this House if it were not for the Labour bill that prompted that action and that information to come forward. So on that basis alone, this bill is a very welcome one, and this should prompt action that's required, action that's needed, and action that, frankly, is beyond urgent.